Yep, it's recording.
Hi, everyone out in the garden today. Thank you for joining us for this chat. I have been very anxiously anticipating this video that we're about to do, not only because the topic of dreams and goals is important to me, and I believe it's important to all of us, but also because it's going to give me another opportunity to get to chat with Rebecka Eggers, who's here with us today. I haven't known Rebecka long. I think it's just been a couple of months, but in that little bit of time, she's quickly become one of my favorite people, because I don't think there has been an interaction that we've had that I haven't felt like I walked away, A, not knowing quite what hit me, and two, feeling like I had completely transformed. And so this gives me another opportunity to have a conversation with Rebecka, and I guess we'll see what happens to me in this conversation. But thank you, Rebecka, and welcome. And I really appreciate you taking the time out to have this conversation.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
So let me tell you a little bit about Rebecka. So Rebecka Eggers is a dream midwife and meditation improv artist. She's the author of Coming Alive, Spirituality, Activism, and Living Passionately in the Age of Global Domination. She lives in the mountainous highlands of Mexico, where she uses the tools of modern communication to make all kinds of trouble for every last, stagnant, soul-killing enemy of your potential. Rebecka helps bring your dreams to life. She's a trained metaphysical minister, a coactive life coach, a Reiki master, and a tax lawyer. I'm not sure what the connection is there, but I'm thinking that we'll find out as we go. I have a feeling Rebecka's lived out a lot of her dreams. So Rebecka is all of that and so much more. So let's take advantage of her wisdom and expertise and just dive right into these questions. So I think the very first, most basic question I want to ask is, what are these dreams, and why are they important?
Well, I would say that dreams are like the carrot, the carrot on the stick, and the stick keeps moving down the road. And I say that they're like the emissaries of divinity that call upon us to become, right? So that's why I say the carrot keeps moving, because the dream keeps expanding, it keeps growing. Until the end, I suppose. I think if we stop dreaming, we probably stop being fully human. At least, we lose some of the deeper meaning of being human during the times when we don't dream. When we, I talk about miscarried and aborted dreams in my work, and how they affect our ability to dream anew. So that's what I mean when I say that we sort of lose part of our humanity in those periods of time when we're unable to access that experience.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you and I spoke a couple of days ago about just that I only recently realized that I had stopped dreaming, and just had become sort of, okay, whatever shows up, I'll do with it the best that I can. But I had really stopped that sort of forward-thinking dreaming for myself, and you sort of re-inspired me to what would my dream be if I could dream again, and all of a sudden I just started dreaming again. So, and I'm still taking baby steps, but yeah, I really relate to what you just said, and it really struck me also on this thread. I think it was yesterday's thread or today, I'm not sure, but where you pointed out that if Nirmala didn't have if I didn't have my dream, Nirmala didn't have, how all of our dreams intersect. We all need each other as an ecosystem, which is really what we're trying to create in the garden also. We need us all to be dreaming and living out our dreams. And so I agree completely. So can you tell us, for those that might not be clear, exactly what a dream midwife is?
Well, sure. I guess I'll tell you first of all how I came to be a dream midwife is that I had a vision that I was going to be a midwife to other people's dreams, and I could feel the dreams moving in my hands. And I didn't really recognize that sensation until I started training in Reiki, and then I could feel the same sensation. So I really feel like I was called into dream midwifery. And over time, I've kind of come to understand the metaphor a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
A midwife can't do the birthing for you, right? That's what maybe a surrogate mother can do, the birthing for you. But a dream midwife is there in the process. I know what to do if you're bleeding out, right? Emotionally, or, but I can't bring the baby into the world for you. It has to pass through you. And so I'm there to bring you through that transformational experience, because dreams, if they're nothing else, are transformational. That calling us into becoming asks us to transform over and over again. And I think that's really the true purpose of dreams, is to act as the sort of catalyst for us to change and grow into more and more of who we were meant to be every minute.
And so in your experience, would you say, or what would you say is, or are some of the main things that trip people up in the pursuit of their dreams?
Well, I think you came up with this one, right? I want to credit you with that. You asked me about self-doubt, right? Mm-hmm. And I think self-doubt is one of the big ones. Self-hatred is one of the big ones. And I don't use that word hatred lightly. Like, I believe that the traumas that happen to people, and by that I mean the bad things that were sufficient enough to derail our potential.
Right.
The bad things that happen to people, the traumas, really cause a division in the self. And you end up blaming and separating from parts of yourself. And so the dream comes along and it asks you to learn how to love those parts, right? And one of the parts that are frequently crushed in the clients that I work with is their own sense of knowing, which is where the self-doubt comes in. And you had asked me, how do you work with self-doubt, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say that to work with self-doubt, you have to know a couple things about how self-doubt happens. One of the common ways is that there was absolutely nothing instilled in the person as a child that made them believe in their own competence or truth, right? So their truth was literally sort of crushed out of them, which crushed their self-confidence in return. And another way that you get into major self-doubt, and I think this might be the more painful and difficult of the two, is what I called seduction wounds. And this is where, this is what's operating when a child is, for instance, groomed by a pedophile. It's a seduction wound, right? Because the child's needs are used against the child for someone else to get something from them. So that's a really big example of a seduction wound. And the end result of the seduction wound is that we doubt our own desires. And when something shows up that looks like it's going to give us what we truly want, we claw that thing to death because we can't believe that there isn't a bomb hidden in there like the one that went off when we had our first seduction wound, right? So these are the things that I think that are probably the biggest blocks. People think, it's money, it's my job. I think it's the traumas of our lives and the self-doubt and the self-hatred and the divisions within us that keep us from our dreams. And my work in working with dreamers is to help them recollect themselves as sort of a foundational step.
And maybe this is just the flip side of that same question, but as you were talking, I was thinking about people who seem to never get deterred from their dreams despite any obstacles. And so, what is that? But I'm sure at some level we all have self-doubt. We all have those things that happen to us, or, just different degrees of, horribleness, I guess. But yet some people seem to not be deterred by that in any way, and so what would you say is that thing that they have that allows?
Well, I do think that everybody has varying degrees of wounding. I will say that there is a tipping point, right, where the balance shifts one way or the other. And people who were raised in situations that I would call more like complex trauma, like this is something that formed the backdrop of their lives. There wasn't a one-off situation that happened to them on an otherwise strong foundation. And so they learned to survive, right? And they have a ton of strategies for surviving, but they have no strategies for thriving, or few strategies for thriving. Like the balance tips so far to the survival side that they literally live in a different universe from the people who were raised into their thriving. And you know, I haven't done some sort of like study on this, but my educated guess would be that the people who pursue their dreams with relentless dedication were actually raised to thrive. They actually were raised to believe in themselves and believe in their dreams and their potential. And they have some foundation in their lives that allows them to penetrate the space of their dreams, right? Like we don't often think of penetrate as a feminine trait. I'm sort of here to revolutionize that idea. I just have two words for you: Kundalini fire, right? I mean, penetration can very much be a feminine trait. And I use that word very intentionally because when we penetrate our dreams, we thrust our presence into them, right? And that's what you're seeing with the people who pursue relentlessly. They thrust their presence in. Or they spill over is another metaphor, right? They're spilling over in the midst of their dreams. Whereas the people who were taught just to survive are kind of at war with their dreams.
Yeah, and what would you say? I absolutely see that as being true, but then the what's also true, I think there are people who have experienced complex trauma and serious wounding that also seem to still pursue their dreams, you know, relentlessly. I'm thinking people like Oprah, and I can't think of any of the names right now, but you know, almost any athlete out there is someone who kind of, you know, believed in their talent in the sport, and even though they came from a rough upbringing, maybe rough neighborhood, they pushed through all of that and pursued their dreams. So I feel like there's also something. Well,
there's definitely something intrinsic to us that causes us to have fortitude where maybe others wouldn't have fortitude.
Right.
But if you were to examine Oprah's behavior, you know, obviously we don't know who Oprah is in private. Right. But if you were to examine Oprah's public behavior, Oprah displays a lot of skill. And that skill is related to thriving. It's related to success and succeeding, right? So I want to demystify this idea that the intrinsic is all that matters, that there's some trait inside of us, right? Because what I like to get across for people is that trauma teaches us one set of skills and thriving teaches us another. And when you can shift your skill set, you can shift your life. Right. That doesn't mean the first thing you necessarily do is shift your skill set, right? Because it's hard to shift your skill set if you're in, you know, mortal pain emotionally.
Right.
But the shift has to happen. The skill set shift has to happen.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that. It's interesting to think, you know, even the skills that, or sometimes even the skills that you gain through that wounding can be used to shift your life and now create something new with that same set of skills. I hadn't necessarily thought of it like that before.
Yeah, if you can get away from the skills that are what I call nothing more than coping strategies, right? Because like perseverance is something that I learned in some ways because of my trauma. The way that I applied perseverance, right, was hindered in some ways. Like I have a thing you can do. It's called the trauma alchemy quiz, and it'll tell you what your primary trauma coping strategies are. So you have on one side the wounded warrior, and you have on the other side the wounded lover, and it's a continuum. that represents the collapse of self, right? The wounded warriors are often the hardest to reach because can be the hardest to reach because they're polarized into fight all the time. But the wounded lovers on the other side have lost to the greatest degree their sense of self because they start to merge with other people, right? So here in the middle you have, can you hear me okay? It says my internet is unstable. So here you have on, sort of next to the wounded warriors would be the wounded achievers, right? This is flight.
I think that's what I was when I took the test.
That's what I am, right? This is flight. Flight is your primary coping strategy. Well, you put together perseverance with the flight strategy, and you have a kind of doing strategy that's about avoiding feeling. This is what running looks like when you can't get away. It's like running in place, right? You're cleaning the house, you're achieving in school, whatever allows you to stay busy and running in the midst of whatever's happening to you. It's running with no escape. Just like the wounded warrior is fighting with no end, because they've retained their sense of self enough to fight. They were able to fight. Their circumstances allowed it, but they can't do anything else. Their emotional range is frozen in fight.
So I'm going to combine my next 2 points. I know you have a new program that you're launching, which I absolutely want you to talk about. My next question was going to be, so how does one, depending on where they are in the process, either has stopped dreaming completely to, is sort of has a dream but stuck, there's all these obstacles in their way, how do they begin to move forward? How do they begin to dream again? How do they begin to start moving forward towards their dream? And so I suspect that might weave into your program a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're dealing with miscarried or aborted dreams, right, you have a grief process, kind of like you lost a child, right? You lost something that was vital to who you are, that you carried within you. And for some reason, it didn't come to fruition, and there's huge disappointment there. So the first thing we would do in that case is work through some of that disappointment. And we would look at how the dream was lost, right? Look closely at the patterns affecting how the dream was lost. But really, sometimes things are just outside of our control, and there's just grief that has to happen. And so that's the starting place for someone who has stopped dreaming, is to process that grief and the circumstances surrounding that grief, right? It's not the isolated loss of the dream usually. There are factors that have an interplay with that.
Right. For
someone who has a clear dream in mind, but they feel caught up in the circumstances of their life, then we would begin, this is really where my program takes off, is actually for someone who, there's a brief sort of introductory phase where we sort of look at the disappointed dreams. But for someone who has a dream in mind, something they really want to do, I start the program with cord cutting for trauma release and dream fulfillment. Now, the person who shouldn't do this is someone who's so fragmented that the cutting of the cords leaves them with nothing holding them up, right? So the cord cutting is for someone who's relatively intact. But we do the cord cutting process, and we don't necessarily cut from people. We cut from the patterns and habits that are holding us back from fulfilling our dreams. And in the cutting of the cords, that's the ritual act. The way the cords are cut, in actual point of fact, is through the recollection of self, which is a soul retrieval process. And I'm going to be making available the first doorway of my program, which is the cord cutting, as an introductory gift that people can do as a standalone unit. Then they have to take responsibility for knowing that they have to go through this recollection of self process. And then the second doorway is the recollection of self, right? The collection, right, of self, and the recollection. through the soul retrieval process that I've designed, and that'll be available through video learning and guided meditations and that sort of thing. And the program actually goes all the way from the cord cutting, so the Liberation Act, through to becoming the solution for someone else, through telling a powerful story that gives meaning to what you've been through so that you leave a legacy, right? And this is ideal for people who work in personal development, for instance, but it's great for anybody, because leaving that legacy, giving meaning to where we've been, is an incredibly powerful step forward. And then there'll be another level next year where we'll go into broadcasting the dream signal. Because I'm getting training actually right now through a Columbia University program on online and digital marketing, so that I can actually take the dreamers, because what good is it to build the dream if we can't get it out in the world, right? So that'll be the next phase that'll be available late this year or early next year, as people come through the program and then are ready to start that phase.
Can you talk a little bit about the program, the concept of I really love, as you know, I said to you the other day, when I read about the program or you talk about the program, it really does make me salivate, because it's so, first off, it's just so well designed, it seems, but also it's just like what each doorway, just the concept of the passing through the doorways alone feels powerful to me. And then, you know, how you've titled out the doors, and I don't know if that's something you want to reveal or not, but
well, I mean, I can sort of reveal the parameters, because the real mystery here is who you are at the end of the day,
right?
That's the mystery you're chasing in this program. It's not the program itself.
Right.
It's the revelation of your true identity. And I think that's the dream identity is what I call it.
Right.
So, you know, when we go through this process of sort of the foundational work of recollection of self, there are some other things that come into play, like integrating new possibilities, integrating the dream identity once we've discovered what it is, you know, like full energetic integration of the dream identity. Writing of the story. So, I mean, I don't want to lay out every facet of, but
no, but
like
there's the concept of that doorways that you move.
There's a movement from dealing with trauma and recollection of self into thriving, into integrating new possibilities. Apparently my dog's going crazy out there. Integrating new possibilities and integrating who we authentically are before we then move outward into the world. So there's the inward movement and then an outward movement into the world from this new foundation and through the dream identity.
And I think that's what I love. I mean, I feel like there's so much I love about it, but you know, so many things that you encounter out there are either the internal or it's all about the external. And the fact that you walk through all that internal stuff first so that you can then walk through the external is so the whole thing. You know what I mean? It's
the whole enchilada.
Yeah, it's just like, you know, because that's where I feel like I would get frustrated in things that were all about the inside stuff. Because it's like, okay, but and then what? You know, I would get really frustrated. But when it was all about the external stuff, you know, the doing part, and it didn't address what I was experiencing internally, then it felt like a bypass, right? So, so like, that's why I think in part when I read the description and I see all of the stages when you talk about them, I'm just like, that's it, that's the whole thing. Like, you don't need anything else.
Yeah.
You know? Well, except maybe that marketing piece that's going to come next year.
Right. Well, yeah, the broadcasting of the signal. Well, and I have to tell you, you know, I think I was arrogant when I first went into this a little bit, probably because I didn't know what I didn't know. You know, this has been a 7-year path for me. I first came to Mexico, where I live, to the highlands of Chiapas, and had the encounters that broke the shell on my own trauma in the spring of 2010. So this is my, and at that time I said a prayer about not just introducing me to the tragedy, but finally introducing me to the joy and the hope of spilling over. And that, this is the year when the spilling over is happening, right?
Right.
So I say I was a little arrogant at the outset about how quickly things could move for me or for anyone else, right? Now I'm like looking at who my clients are and how long they've been with me, and this is a really complete life revolution that's happening. Some of my clients who started with me 4 or 5 years ago are now telling the story. Now they're becoming the solution for someone else. Some of them are starting businesses. Others are wanting to leave a legacy for those who are coming up behind them.
I think that's
so
good.
yeah, it's something that I'm going to offer as 7 months and 7 doors, I think. But it could easily be 7 years and 7 doors if someone really undertakes to change who they are through this process. And of course, it's iterative. It doesn't, it does not happen.
And so what happens
linearly?
What happens when someone has like multiple dreams?
Well, I think you can either weave the multiple dreams into one dream. I mean, obviously I had one dream when I started, and now I have 7 dreams essentially that have been woven into, right, one contiguous process. So they either get woven together, or something falls away, and you have to, like, I encourage my clients to concentrate their focus.
Right.
If you don't have concentrated focus, that's like not having penetration, right? You never get into the space, and we only have a certain number of hours in the day. So we have to decide which dream holds the most charge for us, the most, which is the most active carrot for us that will cause us to keep moving down the dream road in the dreamscape, right? Because there will be challenges along the way, and we want something that's powerful.
Right. So I think that we can talk about this all day long, and I think it's great. But when I'm really, the part that leaves me not knowing what hit me is usually when, you're actually doing a session. And obviously we don't have time to do a whole session, but we did talk about the possibility of doing a short little session as an example for people. So I guess I will be the guinea pig for everyone to kind of get a taste of what Rebecca's like in a session.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so I'll warn everybody. Mexico's a place that loves noise. And right now the marching band in the neighborhood at the school is starting to practice. So you may be doing your session to drum rolls. It's about 90 degrees in my office, so I'm reluctant to close the windows. So you may be hearing my dog bark or the drum rolls.
No problem.
What the heck? That's what it's like to work with me anyway, right? Like I don't have a sterile environment. So you had asked me about self-doubt. So does that feel alive for you as something that you might want to work on today?
I think so, yes.
Okay. So if you had to make a guess about where your self-doubt comes from intellectually, what would you say about that?
Where it comes from? I'm not sure if this is answering that question exactly, but I feel that what my self-doubt tells me is you're not qualified to do that, or who are you to do that?
And whose voice is that?
Mine.
I'm going to challenge you on that. It sounds like an internalized message that it sounds very much like your voice, right? Like in this group that I'm doing about my book, we talked about, and you're in the group, so you're familiar. We talked about the internalized voices of the powers in the domination system. And this seems to me very much like that, right? Where you're chanting the slogans of the powers, and you can't tell that they're not your own voice.
Mm-hmm.
So what if self-doubt, this voice that says you're not qualified and who are you to do that, isn't really your voice?
Right, I'm feeling now like I'm seeing, because my mind wanted to originally go to, it wasn't, but that my family sent me that message, but I don't think that they did. And I guess since I didn't see that, but now, I do think I'm having a moment. I think that it was the structures around me that sent me that message. I went to Catholic school most of my life. I don't know if that puts it a little bit into perspective, but from the very beginning, it was all about what we couldn't do. And, not so much in terms of goals, but just anytime you wanted to impulsively do anything, it was like, no, don't do that. So I do think, I think that in some way it was the structures that I encountered growing up that did not allow me to be me.
So a lot of shame around being you.
Right, like there's something wrong with me for wanting to be that. Wanting to do that is a bad thing, or there's something wrong with you.
Okay, so do you feel okay with taking this a little bit deeper?
Yep.
So if you close your eyes and just breathe into your belly, right above your belly button, or right below your belly button, actually, right below your belly button, and just center and ground into your core. Maybe rub your belly a little bit. Just say okay or raise your hand when you feel really connected to your center.
Okay.
And now that you're connected to your own center, what's really true about the influence of these structures that have said it's not okay to be who you are, to want what you want?
They were wrong.
Yeah, they were wrong. And where are they inside of you? Do they live somewhere? Does this wrongness live somewhere? I mean, it's interesting that they made you feel wrong about yourself and that they were, in fact, the thing that was wrong.
No, they're not a part of me. They're external to me.
Okay, so there's no trace of them inside of you. They're just sort of like a parrot sitting on your shoulder yammering away. Okay, so I'm going to have you do now what I frequently do with my clients, which I call it boundary breathing. So you're just going to breathe into your core, and as you breathe out, you're going to create a bubble around yourself. So that's just you in here. Like even I'm outside the bubble. This is just you inside your own core energy. Just let me know when you have that bubble built around you.
I have it.
Okay. And now that you're in your own bubble energy, what's true about those structures?
They can't hold me back.
Okay. They can't hold you back. They don't have the influence you thought they had. It's just really funny that Sunny, my little dog, is barking because he's like the quietest thing in the world. So whenever something like that happens and it's just odd in the middle of a session, I like to ask, like, what comes up for you about this when you hear the dog barking in the middle of all this?
That he wants to be heard.
That he wants to be heard. And what do you have in common with that? Do you want to be heard?
Yes, absolutely.
And what do you most want to be heard about?
That I don't want to be restricted by other people's rules.
Okay, so you want to be heard about your desire for freedom.
Yes.
And is there also an element of like taking control of the power in your expression?
Yes.
So what if you said with the full force and power, with the full penetration of your strength and energy and, you know, your core energy that you've made this bubble with, what if you were to push into the space this desire to be free? What would you say about that? With the intention to create this freedom.
What keeps coming to me is that I want to hunt for ecstasy.
I was just thinking, actually. Okay. So there's not so much that you want to say, it's what you want to do. You want to find your ecstasy.
Right.
So there's been all this charge on being heard, but what you really want is the freedom to do. What's different about that?
What's different from wanting to be heard?
Mm-hmm. Now that you've shifted into wanting to hunt for ecstasy, what's different about that?
What I feel is different is that it doesn't depend on anybody else. Like, in order for me to feel heard, I have to feel like someone else heard me. But for me to hunt ecstasy, that's all on me.
So I want you to say that again, because it's just so powerful.
That wanting to be heard depends on other people hearing me and feeling like I'm being heard by them. Where hunting for ecstasy is all on me. I'm in control of that. And I don't need anybody else in order for me to be able to have ecstasy.
And what does the ecstasy hunter have to say about these structures and their yammering voice?
To get the fuck out of my way.
Yeah, there's no interest in having that message received and processed. You just want them gone.
Yeah, just gone. There's no place for them.
And how much self-doubt are you feeling right now?
None.
Because you know how to hunt ecstasy. It's who you are.
That is who I am.
And how about your dreams right now? When you're in ecstasy hunter mode, how alive do your dreams feel?
I normally, when I think about my dreams, the dream gets stuck, like the visual gets stuck for me. And so I'm able now to see myself executing. There's two main dreams that I have, and so I can fully visualize myself in both of them right now. Where before, when I started thinking about them, it's almost like a record skipping. It would out.
And how does action in these two dreams, how does it become like a reinforcing, like action in one dream reinforces the other? I feel like there's a connection here between them, that they interrelate now that you're in this place. Are they really as separate as they appear?
No, I see the first one, my short-term goal as being a stepping stone for the longer-term goal.
Yeah, so they kind of merge together into one path. And that division that you were seeing before, seems to have been resolved by moving into your true identity.
Yeah, yes.
And is there anything else we need to do today to work with your dream, your ecstasy, your voice, any of the things that have come up here today? I feel like self-doubt is dead. Like I see it as a skeleton hanging in the, in the field to scare off the birds.
No, I mean, I'm seeing it all clearly. I mean, I guess I was gonna say, I guess I need to figure out what I need to do in those moments where I get tripped up. But it's funny because right now I don't feel like I will ever get tripped up. But logically, I know that probably something will trip me up along the way. That's life.
So what if something tripping you up is a trigger for penetrating the dreamscape, right? This place that's unfolding in front of you now as a path.
Mm-hmm.
What if it's a trigger to penetrate that space with ecstasy? To invest more of who you are in the dream. So that self-doubt becomes an ally in the process.
Absolutely, and that works well with what my dream is. So
yeah, I see you guarding the dream, like holding it in a secret place, and I think that's just so beautiful. And I appreciate that you're being so conscientious about guarding the dream as your sacred, special thing that you're not quite ready to put out there. How does it feel to be encouraged to protect and guard your dream at this early stage?
it feels good and ironic because I'm actually someone who shares everything very easily. And I've shared lots of dreams that I then give up on because, a variety of reasons, but one of them being that people's reactions to your dreams sort of deflate them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very unlike me to not share and to not, put it all out.
Yeah, really demonstrates the sacredness of what you're holding, and like the way when you're first pregnant with a baby and it's just this tiny little bundle of possibility in your womb.
Right.
You don't always want to share that right away.
Mm-hmm.
You don't always want other people's eyes on that process. I just want to encourage you to hold your dream lovingly and intimately in this space of ecstasy. And that seems like a really powerful place for us to stop if that resonates for you.
Yes.
Okay. So you can just take some deep breaths and start coming back, move around a little bit. Just let me know if there's any last questions you have, or if you just feel like that's a great place. I feel like that's kind of a great place for us to leave off so that we don't disturb the work that we've done. But I'm happy to answer anything you have.
No, I mean, I was just going to add that for me, it was, in the beginning, I was like, when I say I was like, whoa, it's like, and I think I've mentioned to you before, I have such an issue with that freedom, sense of freedom. It's like anything that tries to put me in a structure, I get like a rebellious teenager instantly. And it could be silly things. Like I've said, I can't do a presentation to a PowerPoint because the structure, just the structure of a PowerPoint presentation drives me nuts. Or, if something has a schedule attached to it that I have to follow, it's like everything in me wants to resist that, and I'm always joking around saying, I don't know where that comes from, but I want no restrictions on me whatsoever. And I feel like with every, as I get older, it only becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, that resistance to that. So, and I kept saying, I don't know where that comes from. But now I realize it probably comes from years and years and years of, you know, restriction from structures of things just having to be this way because I said so. And, you know.
Well, and that'll put you at odds with your dream, because a dream does come with structure in
Right.
some ways, right? There is a process to bringing most dreams to life, and giving yourself over to that process from where you were can be a really difficult challenge.
Right. And you know, I don't have a problem with structure that's self-imposed.
Mm-hmm.
The external, it's the external. So, but it'll be interesting for me to see how that starts to unfold now that I've identified it a little bit more, its source, or at least it's a source. Maybe there's more to it there, but I'm interested to see how that looks going forward. So thank you again. You never disappoint, Miss Rebecka Eggers. I do want to say before we end that I highly encourage people to check out Rebecca's Facebook. It's not a page, I guess. It's just your account.
Yeah, well, people can send me a friend request.
And a friend request her if she is constantly sharing, you know, thought-provoking ideas and questions, and I get so much from reading your page. And so I'll put a link to that when I post this video. And also I would encourage you to go to her website so you can see all of the offerings that she has there. There's some things that you can access, a lot of stuff that you can access for free, that are helpful, like that quiz that you mentioned earlier. So I encourage you to go visit her there. And is there any final thoughts that you might want to share?
Just thank you so much for making yourself vulnerable in this process, and for really moving into the truth of where you were feeling that self-doubt.
Thank you. I'm going to keep looking for excuses to chat with you so I can keep transforming. So thank you again. I hope that this is beneficial to everyone who watches the video. I will post the links to access Rebecka when I post the video. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask me or Nirmala or Cheryl. I'll be able to answer any questions you might have. So thank you again. Good night. And we'll talk soon.